So there was a recent video that asked, why is the Philippines still making bad movies? And I'm like, much like every other country with a busy film industry, do you think Hollywood doesn't produce bad movies? But maybe this is something that we can clarify, especially for Filipinos who aren't here in the Philippines. Charot! Okay, I'm not here to start a fight, okay? But I do understand the reaction of people, especially people living in the Philippines, to the video. But on the other hand, I see where it's coming from because I was that kind of girl when I was this ignorant, underexposed, tiny little teenager. Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who were covered in this layer of colonial mentality and also underexposure to actual Philippine media. But after watching the video, I did step back and thought, where is this coming from? And I kind of used to be that girl who kind of generalized what Philippine cinema is, despite living in the Philippines all my life. And that was all because of my own ignorance and my own underexposure to Philippine cinema. So let's talk about that. When I first watched this video, the first question that popped into my mind was, what do these creators mean when they say bad films?
Wala na palabas. Ano channel yan? Yeah. Pelikula? Yeah.
And that was a question on my mind because to resolve the problem, we have to know what the problem is. Because the video mentioned like cringy rom-coms or badui comedies, and those exist. Or just because the lead star in a comedy movie is Vice Ganda, for example, that doesn't mean that the movie is automatically bad, right? But the way the video was presented, it made it seem like that. And that's pretty much what the people were reacting to. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel like there is a group of people out there who think that Hollywood standards are universal. I understand that no matter where you are in the world, you're probably exposed so much to Hollywood or Western filmmaking. And sometimes that creates the illusion in our heads that that is how movies are supposed to be made. Trust me, I know. I live in a country where, despite having a vibrant cinematic culture, more than half of the films screened every year are movies from foreign countries. But over the years, I've grown older, I've learned so much more about my own country. I'm working in the creative industry, and we're always very adjacent to filmmaking. Thinking that Hollywood is the universal standard is just plain wrong. It's meant to reflect the Filipino experience. And honestly, this goes for any kind of media that we produce here in the Philippines. Music, poetry, TV series, all of that is rooted in how we live our lives as Filipinos. Just listen to SB19's Pablo talking about how different P-pop is from the rest of the pop world.
I think what we bring to the table is the journey or the experience of the Filipinos, us, all Filipino members. And we every time we try to create or write our music, it's always about our journey, our experiences in life. So basically, maybe that's what makes P-pop or Filipino music.
Another interesting thing that was mentioned in the video were cringy rom-coms. And this is why I really wanted to understand what the creators meant by bad films. Because I don't think the genre of rom-coms in the Philippines is automatically cringy. There have been really well-made, impactful rom-com movies in the last decade. I think one of the bigger recent releases of a rom-com here is Unhappy for You, starring Joshua Garcia and Julia Barreto, which I felt was written and presented very, very well.
We were together for 4 years. Hinayaan kong baguhin niya ako, yung buhay ko. Just too much. And I don't wanna go back.
I think that's a thing with hugot because the idea of hugot is, I think, very specifically Filipino, and that's why we're very emotional. We draw out feelings in our filmmaking. We are melodramatic. And when you compare that to Western movies where emotions are always understated, like when you think of an Oscar-winning dramatic performance, it's usually not those exaggerated emotional moments, right? So if you're used to that kind of content, it's just gonna look cringy to you. And again, just because Hollywood does it doesn't mean that is the only way to do it. Because for many Filipinos and Filipino viewers, the melodramatic approach is a great way to reflect societal struggles like poverty, corruption, and really, really strained family dynamics. So what might seem like excessive to an outsider might be a really good emotional release for the Filipino audience. Like the very important Filipino film, Bata Bata Paano Ka Ginawa, directed by Chito Ronyo.
Wala akong ginagawang masama! Akala mo lang wala! Pero meron! Meron! Meron!
That movie took emotions up to here, but that doesn't take away from how brilliant the writing, the directing, everything was. But don't get it twisted, the Philippines has also produced amazing, subtle, emotional family movies. One of my favorite experiences during the Cinemalaya Philippine Independent Film Festival was the movie Distance years ago. This movie, directed by Percy Intalan, was this very heavy family drama, but everything was very subtle, everything was understated, but it still gave the same emotional impact like Bata Bata Paano Ka Ginawa. Another thing that was mentioned in the video were Baduy comedies, and again, I don't know what they mean by Baduy in that context. I don't know if they consider that bad, but movies like that, especially movies directed by someone like Wendy Ramas, would always be assumed to be bad. Like there was nothing of value to it because of slapstick comedy. Slapstick comedy is very popular in the Philippines because of like the exaggerated physical comedy, absurd camp situations. And again, if you're so used to Western movies, you're like, ew, this is like, what is this? This is shallow. But the thing is, there's often more to these movies than meets the eye. You know what's sad about this is I learned so much more depth about movies like this through Twitter, now known as X. Didn't learn it from like papers, I didn't learn it from reviews, I learned it from social media. Because that's how we, at that time, as a society, wanted to categorize those kinds of movies. And I think that's because when we let Hollywood dictate what's good or bad for us, we often miss the socio-political importance of these slapstick comedies. Again, I learned this on Twitter. Ang Tanging Ina was a very funny comedy movie, but it actually satirizes the struggles of a single mother in the Philippines. It was a display of like the economic hardships and the struggles of a single working class mother. It's like any other good like Friends. Friends is such a good show, but like it had so many also like bad elements. That's sometimes movies are a product of their time, but like that doesn't take away from how good it was made. Also, another constant target of like criticism like this are like Vice Ganda movies. But I feel like I found so much importance rewatching the films Unkaboggable Private Benjamin, Girl Boy Bakla Tomboy. Girl Boy Bakla Tomboy was actually an examination of like feudal farming in the Philippines, which is very interesting. And those are movies from like what, the 2000s? More Filipino comedies are actually getting so much better. Like one of the recent releases that I think was a great comedy was Becky and Badette, starring Eugene Domingo and Bokwang. But also one of my favorite Filipino comedies of all time is Kimi Dora. That was slapstick, that was camp, that was everything you want in a smart Filipino comedy. Now let's talk about film quality, because I think sometimes our delusion is when we want to define what a good film is, it has to be like Marvel level special effects or something. And I get it, there are really, really good Filipino films that are technically, and you can clearly see it when you watch a movie, that they're very low budget. We did a video on the amazing movie Ang Pagdadalaga ni Maximo Oliveros, which was an award-winning coming-of-age film back in the early 2000s. And how they produced the film was that they were actually sharing their camera with another production. Watch that video to know more of that story. Having said that, there have been so many Filipino movies, not only written well, directed well, acted in well, but also production design, camera work, lighting. Those movies exist. Ooh, there is this movie I remember from years ago called Respeto, starring Abra. And it was this great social commentary movie that was about like flip top and street culture. But everything was great. Not one shot out of place. The lighting was great. So everyone, if you have the time, look up the movie Respeto, directed by Treb Montreras. Another great example is what we sent to be considered at the Oscars last year, which was Iti Mapukpukaw or The Missing. Another well-crafted Filipino film that was kind of like hybrid, like it was animated, and it was also a very good movie. I also do think that the style of storytelling in the Philippines is just different. Even for me as a writer, I'm so familiar, for example, with like the 3-act structure, which we also use in the Philippines. But so many Filipino filmmakers don't really subscribe to that. Lav Diaz, for example, is a Filipino filmmaker known for extremely long, drawn-out movies. He has a movie where it was so long, they had a lunch break. So I think that's one undeniable thing about this is we still need to talk about colonial mentality. And I'm not saying that Filipinos who don't live in the Philippines anymore are any more of like victims of colonial mentality than we are here, because I think that it's a generic Filipino problem. But I do think when you are also raised in a place where filmmaking or media is presented a certain way, and you also want to familiarize yourself with the culture that presents media in a very different way, that can really mess up with your viewpoint of what a quality movie is. So I don't know if this is accurate, but I just remember a movie from Kidlat Tahimik. This was when I was a kid. The movie was released way before, like probably in the 70s, but I was a kid when I saw most of it. I didn't get to watch the movie in full, but it was called Mabangong Bangungot or something like that. I'm gonna Google it. And I remember seeing clips of it, and it was supposed to be a comedy, but it was not funny to me. And I want to rewatch it because I feel like it seems like it wanted to say more. And I think that's what I think people who are so subscribed to Hollywood aesthetics are missing. Because look, Googling it now, it was well received by critics and got the Critics Award at the Berlin Film Festival. So we're not really here to knock on Filipino Americans, but I did want to sit here and go through what I thought were points that I think led to the mistakes made in that video. Because again, every country makes bad movies. And in the video they mentioned Easter Sunday, and I was like, that was a bad movie, not gonna lie. And to be fair, there were good points in the video about the amusement tax thing, which is currently being resolved. Because that really is a factor. They also were mentioning about like how South Korea and China are able to protect their film industry. And there are efforts in the Philippines to do that, but I think that you can't really compare the economic situation in the Philippines. It's just a much more complicated issue that we don't think was really dug deeper into. So we kind of wanted to just offer a different perspective, because I do believe that we have to resist this feeling of valuing a Filipino movie by how it stacks against a Hollywood film. When you take into consideration how American movies are made, or British movies are made, or just in general, Western filmmaking. Or when you also think about like Bollywood, or South Korean movies, like they have their own lane, but we can't keep using them as the standards for our thing, because Filipino movies exist in their own contexts. That's the beauty of art. So I think next time we're faced with the question, why is the Philippines still making bad movies? Well, first, we have to remember, bad is relative. And I would like to acknowledge that maybe the intent of the video wasn't to, make us feel the way we did. But I do appreciate that this triggered the resurgence of conversations about how beautiful and how strong and how vibrant the Philippine film industry is. Like when you look at social media right now, people have been bringing up that Bong Joon-ho is a big fan of Lino Brocka, a renowned Filipino director, and that one of his movies, Maynila sa Kokonan Liwanag, was one of the inspirations for the movie Parasite. And today, there is no shortage of Filipino filmmakers whose works constantly get awards and recognition, not just from the Philippines, but all over the world. I guess what we're just trying to say in this video is that we should just celebrate what we have. So as viewers, we always will have opportunities to support the Filipino film industry, and we have to keep doing that. We have to intensify that, because there is so much beauty in the way we make films, and one video cannot cancel all of that. Because if there's something that I learned over the years of exploring my own views on Philippine cinema, it's that Hollywood was never and shouldn't be the standard. Thank you for watching that video. Now, this was a tough one because we usually plan things way ahead of time before we make them. This one was really a spur of the moment thing because it's a hot issue, and as people who work in the creative industry and has been working adjacent to filmmakers a lot, this hit close to home, and we felt the need to, have a little conversation about it. And I hope you guys also have your own takes on this. So please feel free to leave your comments. And also, this is not to like send hate to anyone. This is merely a reaction and maybe our effort to steer the conversation in a way that's a lot more productive. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe to SISNE Pop because we will be talking more about Filipino pop culture. We have a lot of content on drag coming up. We have a lot of P-pop content down the road. So don't forget to subscribe and like this video. But right now, let's get back to making more movies. But right now, let's get back to creating more content. I'm Momo, and I'll see you in our next SISNE Pop video.